Hello and welcome to Hot Issues. Today we are looking at the very controversial topic of the Economic Partnership Agreement between West African states, ECOWAS, and Europe. There are those who feel very, very strongly that this agreement needs to be signed, and there are others who feel very, very strongly that it should not be signed. Some of the West African countries are up in arms against this agreement and so on. But today, we are very, very fortunate to have a very, very articulate minister to discuss these issues with us. Welcome to Hot Issues. We are lucky, privileged to have with us in the studio Mr. Haruna Iddrisu, Minister of Trade. So you're welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thank you, Kwesi. How are you doing?
Fine, sir.
It's been a while.
What is the Economic Partnership Agreement?
It's a preferential trade agreement that is being negotiated in the last decade or more between West African countries or ACP countries, African, Caribbean, Pacific countries, with the European Union, which was based on the Cotonou Agreement up to 2008 in terms of market access and the duration of market access. And like you rightly pointed out, it's been lingering in the last decade because it's a major decision for governments. You have civil society groups naturally in arms, raising strong objection to the Economic Partnership Agreement. You have civil society group raising sometimes very legitimate concerns and sometimes to emotive issues. Thankfully, the ECOWAS Heads of State and Government meeting in Yamoussoukro in La Côte d'Ivoire elected our own President John Dramani Mahama as chair of ECOWAS. So he's now chairman of the ECOWAS Heads of State and Government. Coincidentally, he will preside over this particular matter and this decision, which was the basis of a recommendation of an earlier ECOWAS Heads of State and Government meeting in Dakar, Senegal, which mandated President Saleh of Senegal to lead a technical committee to conclude aspects of the negotiations which has been ongoing. The President Saleh committee and technical committee submitted its final report of a kind of conclusion it sought to reach with the EU to the ECOWAS Heads of State and Government meeting in Yamoussoukro, which was unable to take a definitive decision on the matter, save to appoint a 4-member nation committee, Ghana, La Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and Senegal, to look more into some aspects of it with the EU with a view to finalizing an agreement which will become the basis of a regional pact between ECOWAS and the European Union. So that takes it to another level, because Ghana as a country initialed an interim EPA in 2007. Indeed, La Côte d'Ivoire have gone ahead of Ghana or beyond Ghana and beyond just initialing to sign an interim EPA. Both of us, particularly Ghana and La Côte d'Ivoire, we have up to October 14 to sign an EPA or suffer the consequential decisions of the European Union in terms of our market access to the EU market. Now, if you take, for instance, the ECOWAS Heads of State meeting, which I referred to quote President Alassane Ouattara of La Côte d'Ivoire, a very strong leader at that, he said that he trusted that ECOWAS was in good hands with President Mahama elected as chair of ECOWAS. And indeed, he also said that the ECOWAS Heads of State recognize his competence and his commitment to the values of integration in determining that he has the regional grouping at this particular hour. Now, Ghana and La Côte d'Ivoire, we have initialed interim economic partnership agreement. So this agreement that will Ghana sign or Ghana would not sign, it's important the Ghanaian public appreciate that as far back as 2007 there was an interim EPA which allowed some savings in terms of us having market access and to comply with regulation 1528 of the EU, which potentially could deny us market access to the EU market, to which we have 100% duty-free, quota-free into the EU market. And they are saying that they need a reciprocal, open, duty-free, quota-free access to our market. And we are saying no, we are unable to grant you 100% market access. So for a decade, the discussion and negotiation has been around 5 main issues. 1, market access, duration of market access, development program assistance package for countries which naturally will be affected by this decision, the non-execution clause, rules of origin clause, most favored nation clause, custom union clause, and many other related matters. But Kwesi, for us in Ghana, maybe I should use this philosophical saying in my local culture to demonstrate what an EPA means. Yes, it's true that an EPA will come to Ghana with an economic adjustment cost. Yes, it's true that an EPA will come to Ghana with fiscal revenue losses. Yes, it's true that an EPA will come to Ghana raising issues of our competitiveness and capacity to compete with the EU in terms of their products. But it's like the witch's dance. If you dance forward, you lose your mother. You dance backwards, you lose your father. If you sign, there are ramifications and implications for the Ghanaian economy. If you withhold or postpone signing, there are dire consequences which may lead to the loss of your mother. So we are caught in a double-edged sword. Either way, the sword will hurt you in some respect. So I appreciate some of the arguments that civil society groups have raised. One, as a country, we ought to have conducted a fiscal impact survey on what the implications will be for us physically, so that we know in terms of the numbers what fiscal revenues we would lose. We naturally will lose if you open up your market, whether at 75 or at 85% market access, and depending upon the duration. I'm also aware that between 2007 up till 2012, some discussion had gone on and some consultations had gone on. But Kwesi, the major concern is that today Ghana exports 49 to 51% of our major exports go to the EU market. Can you imagine what that will mean for us immediately if we are denied market access to the EU as a retaliatory measure for us failing to sign on to the regional pact, which is the ECOWAS EPA with the European Union? It means that companies such as I don't want to be specific, but a number of our cocoa processing companies cannot export anything abroad. That will mean that there will be loss of jobs, there will be loss of revenue. It will affect the growth of our economy and other implications, just as we are mindful of what the implications of a signed EPA will be as an impact on industry.
First of all, I'm just wondering why we got ourselves into the position where the choice is really between losing our mothers or losing our fathers. It doesn't appear to be a very nice choice. Why did we get ourselves into this position?
Our options are narrow, if not limited. The EU remain our major trading partners. We have already taken some proactive decisions as government. One, to diversify the direction of our exports. So we need to discover and identify new markets. As I speak to you, we are opening new trade offices in Japan, China, Turkey, and South Africa, in order that we can deepen our bilateral and investment relations, and in order that we can satisfy some of their minimum phytosanitary conditions, in order that we can increase some of our exports, particularly horticultural exports and non-traditional exports, to those markets. But we are not there yet. You are just beginning.
But should the European Union necessarily be the major recipient of our exports? It shouldn't.
But they are, as a fact.
How many people are there in Europe?
We cannot change that overnight.
A quarter of the world's population. A quarter of the world's population is in China. Quarter of the world's population. What is the population of Europe?
Regrettably, you did not identify China, and China didn't open up its market for you like the EU have done. So you get to make a choice, and we chose EU. In terms of, I've just given you indication of exports. In terms of investment in Ghana, the European Union investment is the most significant and most substantial. So you simply can wish it away or avoid it. That is not to suggest that anybody wants an economic partnership agreement, but it's becoming compelling, and we need to take a decision which is in our best national interest, one which protects us today and tomorrow, and one which will position us to improve our own capacity and competitiveness in order that we can compete with them. Because they are saying that they will give you 100% market access. As I understand it, when the ECOWAS heads of state met, there were unresolved matters relating to duration of market access. So what the EU have opted and communicated to the ECOWAS heads of state is to suggest that we will, between 2015 and 2020. So first of all, it's important that the Ghanaian people appreciate that the EPA, even if signed, is not implementable tomorrow. You have a 5 years moratorium to readjust, undertake reforms, to build your own capacity and competitiveness, and to get ready for its implementation. Now the EU is saying that they would make available 6.5 billion to support the ECOWAS countries as a development assistance program to build infrastructure, to build the capacity and competitiveness. We concede and we acknowledge that that is woefully inadequate.
Not just one of they made several promises in the past that they never kept.
I won't disagree with you on that. Even multi-donor budget support since 2013-2014, our Ministry of Finance have had difficulties having access to them. So you are right on that. Yeah. But they are pledging that they will, for over a 20-year period, support with 6.5 billion euro. Now the ECOWAS heads of state are arguing that what will be the compensation for revenue losses in the event that we sign onto an economic partnership regional agreement with you. The EU argues that we're giving you 6.5 billion as development assistance, and the ECOWAS heads of state are saying that we don't find that amount adequate. So it's part of the issues that the technical committee, which was appointed by the Yamoussoukro meeting, will be looking at. Compensation for revenue losses. Nigeria have quantified theirs.
But why should we sign an agreement which will bring about revenue losses, and then we go back and say compensate us for the revenue we are losing? Why do you sign an agreement which necessarily leads to revenue losses?
If you don't sign, Kwesi, they will shut the door at your expense.
So why don't you sign an agreement?
And it will also come at a cost to the state. That is why I said that it's a witch's dance. Either way,
your father would die or your mother would die.
We get to make a decision.
Is that why don't you sign an agreement which would not lead to revenue losses for which you would need compensation?
On whose terms? This is your terms. The ECOWAS heads of state have gone to the EU with their terms that have been rejected. The EU say we would not agree to your terms, and they have their terms, and they've negotiated these terms over the last decade and came to. Let me give you one interesting example. At the last ECOWAS heads of state meeting in Senegal, the EU has said that we need 85% market access with a liberalized phase out implementation of the partnership over a 15 years period. The ECOWAS heads of state said no, we want a 20-year, apart from the development assistance, we want a phase out liberalized 75% market access for 20 years. The EU said no, we want 85% at 15 years. They tangled and finally came to a decision of a sort at a technical level, which said that would give you 75% market access, which means that you still have 25% to protect, and this doesn't affect agricultural produce, and there will be some elimination of subsidies on agricultural products by the EU, and the non-execution clause is safer for the ECOWAS countries. And then there are rules of origin which also can give us some advantage. Now what is important is for us to harmonize whatever decision the ECOWAS heads of state will take with our common external tariff regime at ECOWAS level, which we call the CET. If we have it implemented, we may be operating at same level. Let me just give you the danger.
I was going to ask a follow-up question.
Do
the development assistance, let's say that is 6 billion, you know, how much are we losing?
That is what I indicated to you earlier, that we have not done a fiscal impact assessment.
I've seen the Oxfam, the Action Aid report, and I've seen the Third World Network brief.
I'm not questioning the reliability of that data, but much of it may not be as accurate and reliable as one would have wished.
But so far we are looking at about $300 million per annum.
You can also look at how much you are losing in terms of not being able to.
And that is Ghana alone. That's Ghana alone.
So you see, when Third World, Oxfam and Co are doing surveys, they should do holistic survey. How much are we likely to use by not being able to export? How much are we going to lose for allowing 100%, 85 or 75% market access to our market? Then the relativities we can compare. You don't hold one side of a coin and say, this is my argument.
I've seen the report. It's both sides of the coin.
No, I've seen one side of it. They haven't given you the other side of the coin.
I've seen the Oxfam report, which you are part of.
And share with me your statistics. How much are we losing in export?
Overall, if you do the balancing and so on, you're losing about $300 million per annum overall after the balancing.
I won't be able to put a figure. What I do know, there will be substantial revenue losses. It will have fiscal ramifications for us as an economy, but the effect of it will be felt more from the next 10 years. So we have this period now to prepare as a country. If we are compelled, as we are being compelled, to take a definite decision at the regional level.
What I was trying to do is to compare the development assistance they are giving us and how much we are losing, and to see whether that development assistance is commensurate with our losses. That's exactly what I can only
concede that I do not find the development assistance adequate. I do not find the compensation for revenue losses or fiscal losses adequate. I concede that we do not have the same capacity and competitiveness like EU companies that will also manufacture and have 75% market access. But we also have a national export strategy that we have launched. We are seeking to double our export from current 2.5 billion to 5 billion by end of 2017. If we do it right, we also have expanded market access to the EU, and that would bring in increased foreign exchange and increased export earnings for the country. So it depends upon how you manage the eventuality of a decision, to which we have to take on or before October 2014. The regional group must take a position. I had the privilege and honor to join President Mahama at the EU African Summit in Brussels, and when he met with Chancellor Merkel of Germany, and in particular Barroso, the EU Commissioner, he discussed some of these matters, and his concern is that instead of reducing Ghana and Ivory Coast to country positions or country decisions, allow us to have one regional pact which will realign with our common ECOWAS tariff, which is a common position adopted by the ECOWAS heads of state. So Ghana does not stand alone, and we should not stand alone in this.
Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues. We are talking to Honorable Haruna Iddrisu, Minister with responsibility for trade, and we are talking about the economic partnership agreement with the European Union. So we're talking about the plea from our president that we should not be treated as Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, and that we should be allowed to operate under the ambit of the ECOWAS. How come that we broke ranks to ECOWAS?
A plea well laid. President Mahama was communicating to the EU and its heads of government in his capacity and new role as chairman of the regional grouping, for which there is some negotiation which is about being concluded before end of October 2014 on the necessity of signing on to a regional pact with the European Union. And I'm sure they would listen to some of their concerns, and I believe that when the 4-nation technical committee examines the issues again with the EU negotiators, we should be getting to a decision point to which the ECOWAS heads of state will have to meet again and ratify before a conclusive statement on that matter would be made. But the principle of a regional interim agreement with the European Union have long been established by the ECOWAS heads of state from their meetings in Senegal through Yamoussoukro. It is not the principle which is being debated, but the content of the agreement, issues of rules of origin, non-execution clause, most preferred nation clause, custom union clauses, and in particular compensation for revenue losses, and building the capacity, infrastructure and competitiveness of our own in order to be able to take advantage of whatever pact becomes a decision finally. So there is no debate as to the principle. They have negotiated over a 10-year period, a decade long. They are about sealing a deal.
But we broke ranks with ECOWAS in 2007, La Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana.
Yes.
And signed an interim agreement without an ECOWAS decision.
Because we needed to be compliant with the Regulation 1528, and since 2008, based on the Cotonou Agreement, we needed to establish a certain relationship with the EU. Not the best of decisions though, but the worrying issue is that compared to La Côte d'Ivoire, we are about being same in terms of the composition of our exports to the EU. Can you imagine what will happen to the Ghanaian economy if La Côte d'Ivoire finally signs and ratifies and Ghana fails to sign and ratify? It means that exports from La Côte d'Ivoire will have access to the EU market, and that of Ghana will be denied access. That itself is also problematic. So we will watch the body language of La Côte d'Ivoire carefully, and it may affect our judgment and decision going forward.
But there's another side. Think about Europe. Is Europe prepared to sacrifice all its trading relations with all West African countries and just foster a trading relationship with La Côte d'Ivoire? Europe would not be that reckless.
As and now, that is what they have communicated to
but
the
that would be absolutely reckless on the part of Europe, on the part of the European Union. It would not take that decision because it would not be in their interest.
I'll not take your word for it. Let me hear from the EU
on the basis of
what
the fact
their decision would be.
Is the European Union,
the fact that the EU, what we know as relevant, reliable, dedicated communication from the EU is that you have up to October 2014 to sign and ratify a partnership agreement with the EU. Failing to do so, we may retaliate by denying you.
We will forsake the whole of West Africa and develop our relations with La Côte d'Ivoire. That's not a realistic position.
It will be irresponsible on our part as government not to take a decision in our best national interest to protect our exports into the EU and to continue to secure investment from the EU.
Even when we are losing substantial revenues.
We have an interdependent economy. You cannot blame it on us just today. It has been so since independence, post-independent. We've not developed the economy enough to make it competitive. So we remain dependent. We need them. When you talk of foreign direct investment, you are not looking for local investment. You are looking for foreign partners to be able to put in money into your economy. Today, the lead investment globally in Ghana is from the Europeans.
In spite of that lead investment,
even though we've been courting the Chinese, how much of the CDB loan have we had?
I'm coming. Don't couple too many things.
Okay.
In spite of that lead investment, poverty levels in our country are rising. In spite of that lead investment, we even have problems with access to potable water and so on. So that is not what is going to take us out of
It could be worse without those investments, because some employment have happened. There's been some contribution to economic growth and economic development by way of contributing to GDP, either from industry or to the productive sector. I agree with you that we need to put in our own internal mechanisms to address the growing poverty in our country. We need to put in structures and mechanisms, to which the president well articulated in his State of the Nation address. And for me, that was timely. Let us lead a structural transformation of our national economy. I want a transition from an economy which is import dependent to one which can boast of its own productive capacity. It could not be a coincidence of a vision of President Mahama. He's looking ahead into the future and think that, just as the EU is saying that, open your market to me, let me have increased access. If we increase our exports, we already have open access to those markets. We still may be able to make some gains or some benefit. Now, with structural transformation, I have always indicated that it is not a sprint race, it's a marathon. You cannot review and change the structure of your economy overnight. Probably you may not even be able to do it in 4 years, but at least the president is challenging the Ghanaian population to support him to resituate the Ghanaian economy from the foundation that President Nkrumah laid. What happened to all the state-owned enterprises?
But what happened to the foundation was not laid by President Nkrumah.
No,
it was laid by President Kufuor.
And I'm saying
in 2007.
Absolutely, they initialed an interim EPA.
Exactly.
And for me, the beauty is that the debate should go beyond petty partisanship.
Can I ask?
And let it be informed by a national interest decision, because we stand to gain if we signed, we stand to lose if we sign, and the reversal is as good. Okay. If we don't sign to, we would lose. Okay. And if we don't sign to, we may not gain.
Honorable, we've spoken about market access. Is the EPA only about market access?
No, I've indicated to you matters of rules of origin. For instance, if a product is entering Ghana, the EU says that if you have 15% value addition, they will consider it as coming from Ghana in terms of the rules of origin operation. And for them, if they have 10%, it may qualify them for a rules of origin rule. The non-execution clause will depend upon the behavior of nation states in respect of good governance and many other issues, to which the EU wanted a particular position, and the Equal Access of States said no, we don't want a renegotiation on these clauses. So about 4 or 5 clauses, including the custom union, were agreed to by the EU on the recommendations of the Equal Heads of State. And I think that our heads of state must have some honor and respectability. You cannot engage at that level and seek to engage because of natural civil society and domestic pressures. If you didn't believe in it, you didn't want it, you ought not to have engaged in that particular dialogue. But I do say that it will have dire consequences on our respective national economies and the growth of our economy, because of the interdependent status of our economy, growing it up throughout history.
Now, what about issues of liberalization, which would affect, for example, government procurement processes?
With government procurement processes, that's why I say we need to take some internal decisions.
That's the agreement.
President Mahama is providing leadership in that respect. Mm-hmm. I'm aware that he has asked that the Public Procurement Act be reviewed and emphasis be placed on local participation and local content.
But you can't do that under the EPA.
Wait, you can. You can't.
How?
You see, for now, the EPA is restricted to goods. Matters of procurement and services will be the second leg of it. So let's not confuse what is happening now, which is
the second leg will eventually come.
Say no.
It will eventually come.
We have a procurement act. Mm-hmm. The EU cannot determine for us which procurement procedures we should adopt. And I'm saying that our Public Procurement Act, which has been in existence since 2003, for almost a decade of its operation, have been re-examined. And I'm aware that the President have requested that review it emphasize local content, and give preference to local entity where they deserve it. So there's what we call a margin of preference in the revised public procurement act.
Meanwhile, you're signing an EPA. You're signing an EPA which entails liberalization of government procurement processes.
Liberalization,
so there's a conflict.
It does not host the operation of your domestic laws. I disagree with you. That is not the case. We still have a public procurement act. We have a governing law which will do procurement. We simply are saying that it is not even holistic. That we are simply saying that have 100% market access. What I know, the technical committee and the ministerial committee have endorsed at the level of ECOWAS, which is pending a final decision of the ECOWAS heads of state, is 75 market access, phase out liberalization of 75% in 20 years, to be supported by the development assistance package of $6.5 billion US. So this is restricted to goods. We would come on to services and other areas of procurement, to which I'm aware that Third World Network and Dr. Graham could have raised. We would have a national stakeholder engagement on this matter on or between 15th and 19th of April. We should do a further consultation in order to carry the Ghanaian public along with a decision that we are likely to take with the rest of the ECOWAS states.
No, there's the other issue. I mean, we talk about market access, you know, as if they say you have 100% market access and therefore you can take 100% of your goods into Europe. Is that the situation?
Yeah, you can.
No, but they have standards.
No,
the EU have standards.
Absolutely. So what prevents you
from
what prevents you from meeting those standards? You see, we must also accept challenges as a country. You can't have it easy going. They are simply saying that satisfy minimum requirement and the market is there for you. That's why we have the Ghana Standards Authority,
the problem is that
we have Food and Drugs Board, we have the regulatory body, Ministry of Food and Agriculture. They don't decide for us.
No,
they are Ghanaian institutions.
They decide their standards. We don't decide their standards.
No, we also have standards. We do. The Ghana Standards Authority says minimum standards on the quality of every food item produced.
No, I'm talking about access, to the European market. Access to the European market is dependent on our meeting
universal standards.
No.
Minimum phytosanitary conditions.
The European standards are different from the Chinese
standards. They may be higher.
They are even different from the North American standards.
No, that in some of it there are universality of it. Some. For instance, you are saying that when you are bringing in cocoa, processed cocoa or cocoa beans, or you are bringing in mango or any horticultural crop, the residue of fertilizer in it should be minimum. What is wrong with that? You simply want to save life. You want the quality of that particular product to be one which is edible. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Honorable.
We must live to the challenge of accepting basic minimum standard and complying with it.
We signed up to AGUA.
We never took full advantage of it, unfortunately.
When we tried to take advantage, what happened?
And I say you never took advantage because you were unable to develop your textile sector. The opportunity is still there, but you can't do exports of textiles. As I speak to you, Akusumbo Textiles in a very precarious financial condition.
Manufacturers took advantage.
I'm just giving
they exported and their exports were returned.
Because they failed to meet minimum standards. So we are saying that do your homework well and take advantage of that preferential trade agreement with the US. Some countries have done the best out of it. Mauritius and others are making it very big in terms of the AGUA opportunity. So let Ghana also learn to uphold minimum standard requirement. I'll give you the example of Akusumbo Textiles. The textile industry at independence was employing close to 75,000 of our population. Today is doing only 3,500. So it means that there is something fundamentally wrong.
But you know what
that is wrong. That is what President Mahmoud is challenging, that let us become a productive economy. So what do we do to support Akusumbo Textiles?
But it's not the fault of the textile companies, Honorable. You do know that it's not the fault of the textile companies.
But a multiplicity of factors,
a period of 30
including
years,
the porousness of the border.
Can I raise the question?
Do, Kwesi.
When over a period of 30 years, you've devalued your national currency by 26,000%, all industry would need recapitalization. And when your financial institutions are not able to provide the funds for that recapitalization, or when they can provide the funds for that recapitalization, it's as atrocious interest rates. How will your textile industries function? How can they survive?
I didn't know your economist was this deep in terms of appreciating how management of the fiscal issues, macroeconomic fundamentals affect, and exchange rate all affect the performance of industry, the private sector. I agree with you that currently we are hemorrhaging in terms of the continuous depreciation of the city. Government is doing its best with the combined efforts of the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana to stabilize the situation, because both importers and exporters want certainty. Producers want certainty. You don't buy in a product at 2.5 and then at the time of wanting to get it off, you are told that to get the same item you now must do 2.8. That will come at some cost. And I've often said that as Minister for Trade and Industry, I reflect two sides of a coin. Sometimes I reflect government, my other side is to reflect the private sector. And for instance, when the cost of doing business goes high, I am deeply concerned and worried, because it affects the productive sector of our economy, and that can undermine economic growth and even affect employment, because some of them may be compelled to lay down workers or to undercut production in order to be able to bear the cost. So all the variables and factors that affect the cost of doing business are factors that we should be working together to minimize and reduce for a functioning enabled private sector which can compete with the European private sector. I concede with you that their standard is not up to scratch. Some, but there are a few Ghanaian companies that are comparable to any European company in terms of what they produce. The other side is that if government continues to muzzle out the private sector and becomes the lead borrower, the private sector loses out. So some discipline in terms of the fiscal management becomes also very compelling, and these are matters that government is looking at very, very closely with deep concern of its implications for the private sector and industry.